Good evening and welcome to the May 8th, 2018 Finance Committee meeting. Members present this evening, myself, Councilor Di Natale, Councilors Walsh, Zarella, Boschman. President Kuchmarek informed me earlier today he'll be about 15 to 20 minutes late. We also have present Councilors Donnelly, Fleming, Squalia, Clark, Caddy. We will start with 11518. In order that the Airport Commission be authorized to lease for a period of more than 20 years a certain premise at the Fitchburg Municipal Airport to FACT under the terms and conditions as set forth on the attached restated lease originally authorized by petition 55-03. Good evening, gentlemen. Would you please state your name for the record?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jack Naylor, Sr. I'm the chairman of the Fitchburg Municipal Airport Commission. We're here tonight based on the lease that I'm just going to say that it's been far too long, and you know, we can't get into the history, but we'd probably be here till midnight. I think it's very important that we have Scott Ellis, the manager of the airport, and Eric Sheffield, who's the president of FACT, who has the history of what is taking place down there and why we're here today, or tonight, so we can pass this lease and get everything behind us. My job as the chairman and members of the commission is to bring everyone together, whether it be the lawyers for the city of Fitchburg and the lawyers for FACT, and that's what we've done, and that's why we're here this evening. So we hope that if there's any questions, we're here to answer them. And thank you very much for inviting us.
Councilor Boschman.
Mr. Naylor, Jack, I'm told that the tenants haven't got the copy of this agreement yet. Is that true? And when will they get the agreement on the proposal that we're doing now?
I can answer that again. Eric Shuffles, trustee of the Fitchburg Aircraft Condominium Trust. There's a meeting scheduled for June 4th. They will be getting a copy of the lease presently. It's being copied and will be sent out to them pursuant to our provisions 2 weeks prior to the meeting.
All right.
Any other questions?
Motion to approve.
Motion made and seconded to approve 115-18. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Moving on to 117-18, in order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $75,000 to be charged against available funds and credited to Veterans Benefits, Cash Benefits account. Michelle Marino, Veterans Commissioner.
Good evening.
So this is a request for additional funds to supplement the FY18 budget.
Yes.
And can you briefly explain the reason for the supplement request?
Right now, we're basically out of money between, when we figured out the budget for this year, we were paying out less benefits every month. So where the benefits were raised and we need more. Right now, we're basically out.
So as is stated in the past, the veterans account is a anomaly with the city budget when they come to us for more money. I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner, that 75% of what we pay out is reimbursed by the state of Massachusetts.
Exactly. Yes.
So what's been happening for the last several years is, since Ms. Marino's been on board, there has been a significant uptick in outreach to veterans. Veterans being notified of benefits that they didn't know they had afforded to them for their service through the city. And I believe your membership and the level of interest has skyrocketed in the last several years to why, if you see back in previous budgets, this number is so exponentially higher than when she first came on because of that outreach. We're giving more benefits to veterans that rightfully deserve them, that they weren't aware of previously, and we get 3/4 of the cost back to us.
Right
So-
now, we're servicing, servicing approximately 97.
Do you know how many that was a few years ago?
Well, I've been on, this is my 7th year. When I came on, there was 24.
So it's almost quintupled.
And
So that's-
before that, the state had given us charts of the history. There were some years where the city literally was taking care of nobody with 0 vets. So right now, we bounce around in between about 97 and 95 and 100. I believe our highest has been 104.
So I personally, as chair, find this to be a good story in terms of needing more money for our veterans, because we're expanding that outreach, and as you pointed out, 5 times the number where we were at a few years ago, which is very good news. I'll open the floor up to questions. Councilor President Kuchmarek?
Ms. Marino, thank you for being with us this evening. So in terms of overall budget allocation between what you've already been, what you already had originally allocated in the FY18 budget with this, how does this total allocation compare to past years? I know you said the overall trend was starting to go down, but it's obviously since gone back up. In terms of funding, how would this look compared to FY17 and 16? In terms of benefits paid out.
The benefits being paid out, I want to say this year we're about 50 grand higher than we were last year. And like I said, there are more benefits being paid out also as far as dental and medical.
Okay.
In the past, they weren't aware that the dental expenses could be covered, so we've had a lot of dental expenses.
And that was my exact question, is this an increase in the cost of living and the cost of providing care? I imagine that's a portion of it, but more of it's the increased services and benefits that we're providing.
Yes, a large amount of it is the medical portion.
Wonderful. Excellent. So, I mean, of this $75,000 that we'll allocate from free cash and available funds, we'll get $56,500 back. This is, this is the best $75,000 that we as a city can spend, and it's wonderful that we get that 75% reimbursement. So I'm happily in favor of this.
Thank you.
So the question was asked about historical spending. FY16, we spent $575,000. FY17, it was about $544,000. And this year, we've already spent $550,000, and they're projected to spend about $660,000. So, and the budget is $590,000. So what Ms. Marino said is accurate. Between 50 and 60 grand is where they're running over what they budgeted. But it's gone up from $575,000 to $600,000. Now it's at $650,000, give or take, based on how they're running. So that's the short-term history over the last few years. Councilor Squalia.
Can you describe some of the benefits that you provide to the veterans via the cash benefits?
There's a program called Chapter 115. It's a state-based program, and it's a means-based program. So we figure out what we call their budget based on numbers provided by the state. Then we take their income. If their income is lower than their budget, we supplement the difference. And then there's also the medical payout portion between reimbursing of Medicare, reimbursing of their supplemental insurance, reimbursing of co-payments, dental, eyeglasses.
So it's largely for low-income veterans,
Yes.
and you provide them, you send them like a check
They get-
to supplement their budget, and then also, do you send them a check for their insurance, their dental co-pays?
Well, we'll pay the dental, the eyeglasses, things like that, we pay directly.
To be able
We
to-
reimburse them, we
Reimburse.
require receipts for everything. We do a recertification twice a year to make sure they're still paying the same amount in insurance and the income hasn't changed.
Is there an average of benefits paid, like 100% of benefits, or is there anything like that?
It would be hard to say an average. We have one person, we give them as little as $37.50 a month, and then we have couples that they're on what we call medical only because they might not qualify for a cash benefit. Just reimbursing their supplemental insurance and their Medicare, they're getting over $600 a month. So it's very difficult to say an average.
And all this budget goes also to all the programs that you're saying, they might not get
It's
a cash
just-
benefit,
all
but the
of this money,
reimbursement.
all of this money goes only to that program, Chapter 115.
And how many veterans would you say that apply qualify for any amount of benefits?
Probably, I would say 7 out of 10.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
you're welcome.
Motion to approve 11718.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 11718. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, 11818, order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $175,000, same to be charged against available funds and credited to Board of Health, sanitary landfill expenses, contracted services for the cost of disposal of recycling material now being invoiced to the city. Mr. Curry.
Good evening, councilors. Councilors, this is based on a contract that was signed for the landfill in 1992. Recycling services were never billed. Since then, for multiple reasons, we have been receiving bills for them in FY18. It actually began in the beginning of the calendar year 17. However, landfill billing, as some may know, is several months behind. So we did have a little bit of a warning in FY18 that this was coming. Just the number is a little bigger than we expected, but it's basically it.
What is the principal reason why they're billing us all of a sudden?
They've been threatening for several years. I have a couple of opinions why. One, in FY12, we implemented the barrel system. That reduced disposal costs in trash by $175,000. So I think they've really been looking for ways to make that up. And secondly, the recycling market is terrible right now. Recycling sales and contamination is their disposal costs are probably 4 times what ours are to them to get rid of our recycling. So I think it's more or less an effort to stop their bleeding.
Does the contract state that they have the freedom to not bill us? Because what bothers me about this is we've had this contract for 26 years.
Right.
And now they just hit us with this bill all of a sudden when they haven't for 25 of the 26 years. So it,
Correct. Keep in mind perspective, they were probably making money on recycling. It probably wasn't an issue for the last 25 years.
what bothers me about the contract is it says they're supposed to charge us.
Right.
Now, you'd think I'd say, oh, I'm happy they're not charging us, but, you know, if they don't charge us for 25 years, and then they stick it to us and they say, well, it's in the contract. Well, so it was in the contract 25 years ago. You guys never thought to charge us. Now they just think it's acceptable to hit us all at once with this one bill and then say, going forward, that's going to be the norm. I mean, if the recycling market gets better, they're going to
We
stop billing
have
us?
received sporadic bills in the last probably 5 years. It would go on for a couple of months. I did budget for it a couple of times. It would go on for a couple of months, but it would just cease again. And I would ask for a bill and ask for a bill, and finally gave up. But it is what it is.
Is it fair to say, Mr. Curry, and this isn't at you, this is at the Waste Management, that the fact that we've had a very exciteful year this past season with tree pickups and late pickups and no pickups, and I know your staff has been overly burdened to the point where I would say that at this point they're waste management employees at some points of the day. I find it a little interesting how they're hitting us with this bill when maybe they could have, in a good faith effort, said, you know what? You know, we'll have you guys prepare for this in the future, but for right now, we'll hold off because our service this year has been less than adequate. And I know the weather's been bad and the cold weather, and I know trucks are breaking down. But you know what? Is there, you know, it's frustrating to see this, that they're going to squeeze us for 175 when they have been less than adequate in their services the last year or two, at least from where I sit.
Correct, but you are, Counselor, I somewhat agree with you, but you are talking about two different contracts. This is the landfill contract, the 175. That is a separate contract, the curbside contract, which provides for curbside collection.
Understand,
So
but
it is
they
two
weren't very
different-
good. They weren't very good on their curbside collection either. In both communicating to you and communicating to the residents, and the fact that our staff spends a lot of calories doing what they should be doing, in my opinion. So it's very frustrating to see this, even though I understand. Is there any way, when are we going to renegotiate this?
This landfill contract was actually renegotiated and amended in 2010, so
10.
it's to the capacity of the landfill
Until that time.
till that time.
Okay. Counselor Walsh.
I just have a question. Is this $175,000, is this for all of the past years? Or what is this what does this cover?
This is just disposal costs for the curbside and drop-off recycling.
For
Just recycling,
the
no
current
trash.
year?
For the current year, yes. The
Okay.
entire fiscal year.
All right.
Counselor Kuchmarek.
I'll echo our chairman's sentiment. I won't belabor this, but I'd classify their curbside pickup as abysmal this past 12 to 18 months. And I guess where it's appropriate, Mr. Curry, I'd encourage you to express the displeasure of the council. I mean, they want to charge us $175,000 that they haven't previously charged us. Can't help but interpret that as something above and beyond as a fee, or as a fine or a penalty. And perhaps we should be looking at the same for for how they've conducted themselves in the curbside pickup. So, disappointed to see that they do this after their track record these past 18 months.
I understand. Just so the councilors know, we have had several meetings, and mayor included has been in those meetings, and we have expressed our displeasure.
Certainly, this is no criticism of the Board of Health. I know, Mr. Curry, you've done a tremendous job of trying to hold them to account, and I know that's not easy considering the behemoth of a contract that this is. But at some point, if they're going to continue to look at us for increased revenue stream, then perhaps we have to look at their contract and their performance.
Is this going to be budgeted next fiscal year?
It is.
Okay, so we'll be seeing an increase in sanitary landfill.
That is correct.
Counselor Squalia.
So our curbside contract is up this year, correct?
Correct.
And within our curbside contract, besides just stern words and expressing displeasure, is there anything within our contract that allows us to back charge Waste Management for missed pickups, for possible auditing of their, possible auditing their contamination of our recycling? Because I have had dozens of reports of pickups of trash and recycling thrown in the same truck. Now, I know with discussion with you, you've said that they have a diverter truck. They may have a diverter truck. They do have diverter trucks that have 2 different compartments, but I have not heard from any resident that's actually seen this in operation, and I myself have seen them multiple times when they've missed a pickup coming up my street. It appears that they just throw it in the same truck without any additional work or additional separation. So is there any auditing that we do to ensure that Waste Management isn't contaminating our recycling themselves?
Yes, there has been occasions where we've asked them to drop the loads at a transfer station so they can be inspected. So yes, and as far as enforcement language in the contract, there is some clauses that we can fine them for missed pickups, provided they don't provide a pickup within 24 hours of being notified. So there is tools in the contract that, and we've expanded that in the future contract as well.
Just vast numbers of missed, pickups? Is there a quantity, like a certain number of reported missed pickups equals a certain penalty?
It's each address that's missed. So if I can quantify the number of misses on an address, and I tell them within 24 hours they need to retrieve it, and they don't, there are fines built in.
So largely, the onus of all of this is on our own Board of Health.
It is correct. It is a lot of work to manage the curbside collection process.
And is that being renegotiated to add some sort of capacity for all of our service that we're providing in order to facilitate Waste Management being able to live up to their
I guess
side of the
I
contract?
have to better understand your question there to answer it.
Well, we're doing a lot of work to ensure their compliance, right?
It's kind of our job.
Right, but with an increased amount of missed pickups, it really increases the amount of our required work to comply, to check their compliance. Just-
Right. I just want folks to be, I understand that people are probably monitoring C-Click Fix and seeing a number of miscollections. And I just want councilors to understand that it may not be all on them. Miscollections are sometimes a fault of a residence, blocked, barrels aren't accessible. Sometimes the materials are not in the trash that are acceptable for collection. There's a lot of more that goes on with those miscollections, and it does take us a little bit of time to go through each one, and sometimes we actually will have to do inspections on the miscollections.
So
that
some
there's-
of it is on the homeowners.
Some of them
Residents.
it's not all on Waste Management, I will say that.
Have you, how about these diverter trucks? I hear about the diverter trucks. Have you seen them physically?
I have.
How many does Waste Management employ in the city of Fitchburg, and how often do they?
Usually we don't see the diverter trucks until they fall behind. They're not, we're sort of semi automated to automated in many areas where a truck does all the work, an arm picks up the barrels, but there are some occasions when they do fall behind and they bring in the resources to catch up, and that's when you see the diverter truck. So it's not often.
Are you confident that when, people do see trash and recycling thrown in the same truck, are you
I always
confident
tell
that those
people
are?
to get truck information with me. We'll go out, chase them down. I'll grab the supervisor and show me that truck is out there. We have done that on several occasions. The supervisor quite often now notifies me when there's a diverter truck out there, just so I'll be aware that I might get some complaints in what area that truck is in.
And if residents are concerned in any way in that regard, get their license plate number, take pictures?
Any information you can get from the truck, sure, absolutely.
Okay,
We
thank you.
will take a look at it.
Counselor Boishman.
Steve, you said the contract's up this year?
The contract is up June 30th, so we had a contract for 6 years, from 12 to 18.
Okay, so are we sending that job out for bids after?
We have,
Now, let me ask you a question.
sure.
If somebody else comes out, Boschman comes out lower than Waste Management, what are the chances of me getting the job?
To beat the prices of Waste Management, probably slim and none,
Something on?
quite honestly. We've had 6 companies bid, nobody's within $500,000.
Now, back to the, when I'm reading this thing here, it says recycling. Now, Paul Boschman didn't know that the plastic bags was trash. So he used to put his recycling in the plastic bag and throw it in there. So are we being charged because Paul Boschman made a mistake on that? Because you said it's contaminated and now that's waste.
No, it has nothing to do with it,
Nothing to do,
nothing to do with it, no.
nothing at all.
No, in fact, I have received a grant from DEP, so we will be doing a very special campaign on concentrating on that plastic bag issue, because it is the #1 contamination. So we'll do some sort of a campaign to educate residents to not put plastic bags and recycling in plastic bags in your recycling. And we'll have some funds to do some heavy advertisement and flyers and such.
Now, I was always in the assumption that if I bought a bottle of water, the whole thing was, and I drank it all, the whole thing was recyclable. But now you're saying the caps are not recyclable?
That's really always been the case. You'll notice that most educational material says remove the caps and discard them. That really hasn't changed.
Has it changed? All right, I just want to check. All right, thank you.
Counselor Caddy.
So, 2 months ago, I had an issue with Waste Management with Sawmill Pond condos. And Steve put a meeting together with management, and I can tell you, they're all pretty reasonable guys. But listening to you speak earlier, business is business. In business, if you're not providing what you said you would, you usually make good for it. So would there be anything wrong with inviting Waste Management here in front of the council and just question them, because I would agree with other councils in the room that we had a tough year with them. I mean, it was week after week, all winter long. I know it was the weather, but they were still hired to provide a service, and probably we shouldn't be getting a bill for $175,000. But, we got the health inspector here, we're grilling him, but is it inappropriate for us to get involved, would be my question.
I could propose, they're usually very flexible. I could propose to have them come before the council, and I'm sure they would
Yeah,
do that.
they were real good guys. And
Yeah.
I would just suggest, I'm not on this committee, but
Long overdue.
hold it and invite them in. Can't hurt.
Well, I think you folks are talking more about the curbside contract people more than, this is the landfill side of the contract. Just,
Is
I
it the
don't-
same company?
It's the same company, but it's actually a different division of the company, so to speak.
Who has the deeper pockets?
$12 billion company.
Yeah. Oh, I'm good, thanks.
They make a lot of money off of our landfill, a lot of money. That isn't in dispute. So while I understand the two separate contracts,
Right.
they're still the same company, and they're still the face of these pickups that we get on a daily basis complaints from. So I agree with Councilor Caddy, this unfortunately is coming at you, but I'd love to see the execs here and just bring this up to them, because as a matter of good faith, while it's in the contract, what bothers me is they didn't abide by that contract for 25 years. Now in the year where I've seen the worst service I've had in 11 years on this council, they're hitting us with this charge all of a sudden because the market's not good. I mean, tough to stomach, and a lot of my constituents aren't happy with it. They understand that there are circumstances that warrant lateness, but there were instances where it was several weeks. And I'm hearing trucks breaking down left and right. It's like, well, whose fault is that the trucks are breaking down? They're not our trucks. So I would like to see them here as well, myself. Counselor Donnelly?
Thank you. A concern in congested neighborhoods, I would say the majority of taxpayers don't have the problem, but in congested neighborhoods, who has priority? The rubbish, where they put the barrels out, or cars parking, sometimes in front of the barrels?
Who has priority?
Because there
Residents
have been,
need to
I've
make
seen
their,
numerous occasions where you come up and the rubbish isn't picked up, no car there, but there were probably a car there prior. So I guess my question is, should the council make a priority, or am I only seeing a handful of problems?
it's more or less a handful of problems, and we do have communication with the drivers. The drivers do report.
Drivers that don't live in my buildings, or they park in front of somebody else's house. Now, we've had occasions where we take people, the tenants take the barrels and put them in the street, and people still will park in front of the barrels, which, that's not Waste Management's fault, but if we don't give tools for enforcement, it just causes a callback.
Counselor Zarella?
I would also like to see the waste management people here for us to ask some questions. However, I'd like to point out that because it is two separate contracts, even though it's the same company, what we have in front of us right now is simply an invoice that needs to be paid so that we don't get in trouble on this contract. I think it's related as subject matter, but completely separate as a vote from the question of the curbside contract, which I would support in, enforcing penalty clauses and whatnot, unless they can give a very good explanation for why we shouldn't. But on this matter, I would move that we approve the expenditure.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve 11818. Speaking on that, I take a hardline approach to this. I don't think they deserve anything, for one reason. They should have been charging us 25 years ago. They chose not to. Now all of a sudden they wake up one day and they say, we're charging you. With no, I understand they were billing us a little bit, but they're really hitting us this time in a year where the service has been very poor. And maybe the way to get their attention on this matter is to not pay them or hold it until we get them in front of us. And I'm not saying eventually we won't pay them, but maybe that's our carrot to see if we can get some answers and get some changes. And I think we should share in that burden of trying to do that and not put it all on Mr. Kerr, even though I know it's in his jurisdiction. But, you know, I can't avoid the fact, as I'm sure everybody else is, that our two clerks in the Board of Health, I was joking with them a few weeks ago saying they should be wearing waste management vests. I mean, most of their time is spent doing that and bothering this man. So where's the reimbursement for that? Last I checked, he's not a waste management employee. That's how I take it. So, but, I mean, I'm not disagreeing that it may ultimately have to get paid, but what makes me cringe about this is, you know, they can just bill us whenever they want. They don't bill us for over 2 decades, and they just hit us this now? I mean, that tells me they don't really need the money that much. And I know curbside is different from recycling, but they're making out on both ends. So that's my take on it. You wanted to speak, Counsel? Yeah.
Yes, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I would inquire of the city solicitors whether the contract that we have has an anti-waiver provision of any sort. In other words, did they in any way forfeit their right to charge this fee by not charging it for 20 years? If so, then absolutely, we shouldn't be paying it. But if not, then not paying as a protest against another contract is not really, I think, an option that we have in front of us. I do agree we should look into that, though, because if, in fact, they effectively waived their right to charge this fee, then they shouldn't get a penny from us.
In the end, if we have to pay them, I'd like to make them sweat a little bit, you know.
Fair enough.
There's a little bit of a mea culpa. President Kuchmarek?
So 2 things. Councilor Zarrella's point of, you know, if there was some kind of waiver clause by them not billing us, by all means, you know, we have I would suggest that on that grounds, we don't assume that that exists within the contract. We have a week between now and the council. We could certainly move this forward if there's information that comes forward between now and then that then comes to our attention that, well, actually there is language and we can discuss this further. Then we could certainly hold it, deny it before the council. But I also wholeheartedly agree with Councilor Zarrella in that, you know, these are 2 different contracts, 2 different subject matter. While I'm angry and I spoke openly about my disappointment with their curbside pickup, 2 separate contracts. We did form an agreement, we signed it, you know, 10 years ago. Whether or not they charged us, that's their stupidity for not charging us the past 10 years, and I'm thankful they didn't, but we did agree to pay that. So the time has come, unfortunately, for us to pay. We have to honor our contracts that we've signed as a city, but I would say there are mechanisms in place for us to express our dissatisfaction or displeasure and potentially our disinclination to pay in the future. I understand from the city solicitor that we're actually continuing to negotiate certain points of a recent order that we voted on. They said there's still active negotiations happening between the city and Waste Management on an ongoing basis. I think that can simply be expressed both by maybe a split vote this evening and again, you know, the council later on. But I don't think we need to. I don't think we need to deny this this order to get their attention. I think we're probably going to get their attention tomorrow morning when someone has to call over to them. And again, I think there's lines of communication open for us to communicate this effectively through ongoing contract negotiations, and I think that's the appropriate forum. I think going and taking the nuclear option of refusing to pay them draws a hard line in the sand that we might not be able to walk back from. We have a lot of money and a lot of business between our 2 entities, and I think refusing to pay is can be interpreted pretty poorly.
Councilor Zarrella?
Just a quick question to put it on the record. What is the due date on this invoice?
Well, the 175 would actually cover disposal costs for the final 3 months of the fiscal year. So it's billed on a monthly basis. The account presently has about a couple of $1,000s in it. So with the next bill, which would be for March, would be due. It actually would be due at the end of this month.
Okay, so we wouldn't be in default until sometime shortly after the end of this month.
Yes, correct. We wouldn't be able to pay the next bill that we receive.
Okay, so if we do debate this at the council meeting, we're not risking a default if we decide that we do owe the money.
I have a motion made and seconded to approve 11818. All those in favor of approving?
Aye.
Opposed? One in opposition, Councilor Di Natale. Passes 4-1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
$119.18, that there being hereby is appropriated the sum of $4,320 to be charged against available funds and credited to community development, DEP compliance, for the purpose of DEP compliance at city-owned property at 465 Westminster Street, formerly the site of the Central Steam Plant. Director Skorsky.
Good evening, councilors. So this fee came about because this site recently entered what Mass DEP calls their tiered system, by which, as we're taking steps as a city to fall into compliance with DEP requirements for a contaminated site, we then have to pay compliance fees in order to do that. So just a little bit of history on the site. It was abandoned in 1999. In 2004, it was acquired by the city in lieu of taxes. And basically, since then, had sat vacant. In 2015, it was demoed. And part of the reason, because of that, we were working with Mass Development, their Brownfields Redevelopment Fund, to not only demo that project, but hopefully remove the contaminants that were in the soil and were leaching out into the Nashua River. Unfortunately, the $500,000 demo project didn't accomplish that task, and there is still NAPL, non-aqueous phase liquid, leaking from the site into the Nashua. We're working with an LSP from VHB to find a permanent solution. They also have boons that are basically collecting all the oil. We change those out monthly. We inspect them, and we're working towards a permanent solution there, and actually recently applied earlier this month for a $500,000 additional grant from Mass Development to hopefully fix this problem once and for all. Basically what we'd be doing is digging all the way into the ground, removing everything, shipping it out, and then paving over it. And until that happens, and even when that happens, we'll have to be paying compliance fees until we're officially out and in the clear, and there's no longer fluids leaking into the Nashua. So
There's $9,825 budgeted under DEP compliance. Am I reading the status E wrong?
Right, that's right.
So what's that for?
33 North.
correct. Oh, 98, right. So when I came in front of you all for 33 North Street,
That was a
same
supplement.
issue.
Yep.
We're also, it's not as serious, and basically we're working through bringing both of these. I think we could see a closing at some point in 2019.
Yeah, you don't have to go through the whole details on
Right.
33. I just wanted to clarify that that was specifically for 33. It wasn't
Correct.
for the brownfield at the steam plant.
Correct.
All right. Okay. Counselor Boschman.
I asked you earlier, my question to you, and the previous, why aren't we going after this, after their insurance companies underneath the law, where instead of the taxpayers paying, and then we just say to heck with it, where you get the brownfield money from it for contaminated plots of land, where the state comes in and they clean it up?
It's a great question. And I guess the same thing I mentioned earlier today, you know, it's ostensibly possible. That's the short answer. The long answer is it could be extremely complicated. We don't know what extensive litigation with a large corporation, or at least the remnants of one, where that would get us and what we would end up at. Hopefully with this mass development grant, we'd end up getting about $500,000, and similar to the one we received previously, only paying a fraction of that back over the course of 30 years. So I think it's a safer bet if this works out. And I know municipalities have done that over the years, but it's very tricky. It could take a lot of time and cost maybe the same amount in litigation fees.
And if I could just add, I believe that corporation that owned it previously was in bankruptcy when the city acquired the property.
Right.
So I'm not sure that there's anything left to go after.
Right, so
Is that right?
they
Well-
couldn't pay their taxes on the property, so.
Well, the only reason why I ask these questions, because you're all gonna laugh, I was watching a movie, the Grace Company, which I think was in Boston, Mass, like I told you, and they went bankrupt, they belly up, and they won their case where the insurance company had to come in and pay to clean up their property, because the people in the neighborhood were getting sick.
Right.
No, I know it's not the same thing, but the water's being polluted, and in returns, we're not meeting our requirements to EPA and DEP, and, you know, let's put it this way, I'm gonna tell you honestly, as a homeowner, I'm tired of paying, period. And I'm tired of just saying, enough is enough, and that's okay, let it go, we'll get them next time. When the next time comes, we'll get them the next time. And the next time comes, we'll get them the next time. And the next time never comes. And I'm always paying. And Steve comes after me when I don't pay.
Should I respond to that?
I'm all done.
Okay.
What happens if DEP doesn't get paid? Or what if we don't do this?
I
What will
mean,
they do?
I'd prefer not to make any enemies in the State House.
We couldn't do that.
Okay.
Because they're a lot smarter and nobler than we are, of course, you know, because it's easy to tell other people what to do when it doesn't come out of their pocket. And those are my friends at DEP, who know better than everybody.
So I guess I would say, just to add, well, maybe not to add to that, but we've got a series of properties that fall into some degree of compliance with DEP, and there's a large number of them that we do fall exempt from DEP fees because we took it through tax title because we're actively marketing the property. Unfortunately, this one was actually gifted to us in lieu of taxes as opposed to being taken through tax title. So just for the institutional memory in the room, we need to make sure we take those types of properties through tax title. So as we're falling into compliance, we don't have to pay those fees.
Some gift.
Yeah.
Councilor Caddy.
Are there any safeguards moving forward that the city doesn't take a building like that for taxes? If we had not taken that building, then the question about the insurance would have been valid.
Right.
And the DEP would have been going after the property owners and not the city.
Right. I think it's something that we need to weigh carefully every time we take a building, every time we consider demoing a building. And I think, you know, I wasn't here.
We did not take that building, by the way. That was well before us.
Oh, I know.
So just so everyone understands that.
But again,
We had an environmental inspection done.
right.
Right.
That's
For our
right.
watch.
Councilor Caddy's got the floor.
But moving forward, again, what reason, if the circumstances existed today, what reason would this city have to take a building like that with all its liability?
Right.
So, I mean, we've done that a couple times since I've been around, and it's not, I don't think it should have ever been done.
Right.
But it is done, and thank God we may be eligible for grant funds, but just hope that in the future that, in your tenure, we don't let that happen to us again.
I hope not.
Thank you.
Before I get to Council Donnelly, just on Council Caddy's point, looking at the budget, we incurred $22,000 in cleanup costs in FY12. FY13, we spent $37,000. FY14, $35,000. To date, we've spent over $120,000 on cleanup over those period of years. The first payment was in 2012, so looks like that's when this may have started. I'm not sure, but that's based on there's a line item called hazmat cleanup steam plant.
Right,
And it
so-
started in 2012, we started incurring costs.
So
So,
we incurred the cost from 2012 until 2015.
Mhm.
We got the Mass Development Grant to clean it up.
Right.
And then, post that, there haven't been any significant costs except for boon maintenance. And this is actually the first time we've incurred a fee because we enter in their tiered system. We get a yearly fee we have to pay, so. But we have been paying for it for a while, one way or another, to answer your question.
do we anticipate another fee next year?
Yes,
Do we know how much? Same amount?
same amount.
So that'll be budgeted?
I believe so,
That's
yeah.
the plan.
Thank you to the DEP for us being a part of their tiered system. Must have threw it against the dartboard to see what tier we would be in. Counselor Donnelly?
Thank you. In the form of a question, Councilor Caddy did raise the awareness there, and Councilor Boishman did about the insurance. If this, maybe we got some bad advice years ago and took it, but if we didn't, we could, as mentioned, we could still be in litigation, everything could still be there, and we would be at square one. So maybe it's a plus, the way it's being done.
I mean, to add to your point, I think the one plus is we don't have those fluids leaking into Nashua because we're cleaning it up. We have booms set up and we're not polluting our water. So, there is a benefit to having a responsible party like the city taking ownership and care over our resources. In addition to, in many circumstances, we at least can do some of the initial testing covered through grant funds and work with a private developer on some of the other sites to redevelop the site. For those developers that might be willing to take on that liability. So I don't think it's always a black and white issue of, we should go after them or not. Sometimes it is a good thing for us to take it on, but we need to be deliberate in how we consider that.
Make a motion, we accept?
Motion made and seconded to accept 11918. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take 120 and 121 together. 120 is order that there be and hereby is appropriate the sum of $26,007 to be charged against available funds and credited to several accounts as listed. And 12118, that there be and hereby is transferred from within Water Enterprise Fund Personal Services accounts the sum of $884, same to be credited to the Water Enterprise Fund Personal Services account. Susan Davis, HR Director, is here. I'd like to ask if, Mr. President, you would chair the meeting for these next two items. I must recuse myself. I have a family member who is impacted by this discussion.
Yes.
Good
Ms.
evening,
Davis?
President and councilors.
Thank you.
So we
could
had
discuss the nature of the contract.
another actually wonderfully successful negotiation. This particular group, as you see in front of you with your packet, is for the clerical union, which certainly, I think, serves as the backbone to many, if not all, city departments. They certainly take care, very good care of daily operations, as well as our constituents that come in, and such as, with Board of Health and every other department that comes in, or people that come in to visit. So, that being said, the highlights of this contract are several things. We had the elimination of longevity for new hires. We've discontinued civil service in the hiring process. Those members that are already, in this group that are civil service will certainly retain their civil service rights going forward. And I see one of my charges, one of my jobs, as to make the city one of the best employers in the area. Having said that, one of the things that we added to this contract was an educational incentive for those that are pursuing a degree. But along with that, we've also instituted an educational waiver, which I believe you've seen before on a couple of other contracts, which very briefly is that if an employee does go to school, we're paying for any tuition fees, registration, et cetera, and they leave the city before 2 years, they need to pay us back. The policies that we've added, the vacation matrix, which again you've seen before in some other groups, again that is meant to streamline and make uniform throughout our contracts and our groups. We have a modified and light duty policy that we've implemented. The city telephone usage policy, which kind of firms things up, updates some and puts in place policies that we needed. And we also, as you'll see with the matrix, added 2 senior positions. And again, that is to provide opportunity for growth and development for the employees that we have. The matrix, we did, again, as with a couple of other contracts, we had 5 employees that were at the top of this 20-year matrix. That's what it's set up for. So we needed to drop a couple of steps at the beginning and add a couple at the end because they were topped out to where they, no more further growth there. So we did rearrange that a bit, and again, we added 2 senior positions as well.
Ms. Davis, I want to thank you and the contract negotiation team for your work on this particular contract. I think it is it's not only needed, but I think it rewards, as you stated, one of the hardest working groups of employees throughout our city, and ones that often go unrecognized through the work that they do. And I'm excited to see that there's both incentives here for the city in this contract, but there's long overdue rewards, and it maintains some items and areas and further clarifies areas like educational benefits, which I think are crucial, and I'm pleased to see retained here in this contract. So thank you to you and your team, and thank you to the union's negotiating team for their work and patience, as always. Councilor Boschman.
I was wondering if you could turn around and say to the young ladies in the back here that I said thank you, because I'm a pain in the neck to them.
Oh, I'm sure they already know that. But you brighten up their day. So, that's fine.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Orders.
I have a motion and second to approve 120 and 12118. Speaking to the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. (12218) order that they be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $95,000, same to be charged against available funds and credited to school department capital improvements for the purpose of completing the audio-video upgrade to the Fitchburg High School auditorium, $20,000, and replacing the vacuum pump at Longs Joe School, $75,000. I'll hand this back over to Chairman Di Natale at this time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor.
Assistant Superintendent Jokeler.
Thank you, Chairman Di Natale. Before you tonight, the $20,000 for the high school audio visual upgrade represents the balance of the actual cost. Earlier this year, the city made an appropriation which included $95,000 towards that project. That was essentially a down payment, as we were still in the process of receiving quotes. And there had been discussions that once the project was complete, that the city would fulfill the balance of that. The larger dollar item is the vacuum condenser pump over at Longs Joe, which is a key piece for the heating infrastructure. The current system has reached the end of its useful life. We have been in discussions with the city to replace this for over a year now, and it needs to be replaced before the next heating season.
Questions on the order? Council Boschman.
As we talked about earlier today, I want to make it very clear to everybody on the council, I'll support this, but I'm going to tell you this, I'm not going to spend millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars on the Longs Joe if our plan in the future is to walk away from it. That's how I feel. that I don't plan to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then 5 years from now, we get the new school that we want from K to 8, and then we're boarding up the windows, and we just spent $40 million in the school and we're not gonna use it. That's a far-fetched number, but you know what I mean. So that's all. I'm gonna support your thing. That's all I wanna make it known.
Counselor Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could, I'd like to have either Chief Martineau and Chief Roy, if they're available, to come up and maybe talk about safety on certain streets in the city. I'm talking mostly Main and River, that mini little beautiful round thing there.
Counselor Clark, we're discussing capital expenditures on the school item. So
Boy, am I
that's-
glad that you told me that.
That's not
Yeah.
part of the agenda.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Folks, sorry.
Counselor Caddy?
It was good, though. So, it's gonna get better. I just want to say, I appreciate the fact that, I think that probably we're gonna end up with that building, but I appreciate the fact that they're taking care of it. Because if they don't take care of it, and they give us a building that's degraded, we're not gonna be able to do anything with it. So I think it's important that they do take care of that building. So thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Walsh?
Yeah, in addition, I think that there are certain things that need to be done just to maintain it in an operating condition.
Correct.
And if we fail to do that, then it's just gonna cost us more in the end, so.
Correct.
I mean-
And I guess really to emphasize the importance of this vacuum condenser pump, as I said earlier, that piece of equipment needs to be replaced and installed for the next heating system.
Yeah.
This is, unfortunately, it's not an elective or it's a wish list thing to have. We have to have it.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of you can pay me now or you can pay me far more later.
Right.
I think with what Counselor Boschman said, this is a small cost item.
Yeah.
That's critical in need, so obviously he supports it, he said so, and everybody wants to. I think to his larger point is, projects in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, that may be nice to haves, or we may not need to do it, needs to be assessed considering the future of this facility, which is still several years out, at least 5 to 7.
That's correct.
And we still have the kids in there, so that's why we did the roof replacement, because that's such a critical item that we can't let it stay intact like that for 7 more years minimum. But I get his larger point of the niceties and doing extras and stuff like that. The bare minimum stuff that's critical to maintaining that facility, we have no choice, unfortunately. But considering the fate of that building is still years away, but it's in some cases arguably in flux in terms of what might happen, I think that message is clear about spending more or going above and beyond critical items that we would usually spend money on that we may need to hold off on until that happens. But I'm pretty sure the school department's aware of that. Any more questions on 12218?
Motion to approve 122.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 12218. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. 12318, order that the City of Fitchburg approves the expenditure of funds from Unitil Fitchburg Gas and Electric Light Company gift in the approximate amount of $250,000 for the purpose of said gift, which is for reconstruction of various streets. Commissioner Laxo.
Thank you. Yeah, last year, Unitil replaced their gas mains on about 14 streets in the city in advance of our water main replacement project. They also have a regular program for replacing their cast iron mains with plastic pipe. So as a result, they did a lot of trench excavation in these streets, and we could require them to provide a full permanent trench patch, but rather than have them do that and then grind it up a few years later when we repave the streets, we have an agreement with them that they'll contribute to the cost of paving the street instead of going to a full-blown permanent trench patch. So instead they provide a temporary patch and they give us the difference. So so far they've given us checks totaling over $225,000 for last year's streets, and we'll be paving those over the next several years.
Do you have this money earmarked specifically to certain roads, or is just going into the pile with Chapter 90 that you're using to hit your next swath of streets on your list?
As part of the agreement with Unitil, they're earmarked towards the streets that they excavated trenches in.
Okay.
And we also have to call these gifts so that we can set up a dedicated gift account that we can spend from towards the streets. Otherwise, the money would go into the general fund and we wouldn't have access to it.
But this does supplement our Chapter 90 paving money?
Yes.
This goes on top of that?
Right.
So that's helpful, okay. Thank you.
Motion to approve 12318.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 12318. Speaking on the motion?
On the motion.
Counselor Boishman.
Listen very carefully. St. Joseph, Madison, Oak Hill Road, Franklin Road, Electric Avenue, Clarendon Street.
Counselor, we're not here to,
I'm just telling the streets, that
I
that
know.
would be a gift to people of Clayton.
unfortunately, per the contract, we have to use the money for areas that they excavated. So,
They dug, every street that I named, they dug up.
okay, well, I leave it to the subject matter expert. He knows the list better than anybody, and the list is long, of course, so. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
12418, order that the city of Fitchburg approves the expenditure of funds from the Cumberland Farms Incorporated gift in the approximate amount of $16,000 for the purpose of said gift, which is for pedestrian signals or any other sidewalk or roadway improvements necessary due to the traffic impact of the proposed Cumberland Farms facility at 479 Electric Avenue. Is anybody here to speak on that?
Oh.
Solicitor Pusateri.
No, I can only thank Councilor Boschman for his hard work on this. He roused up the mayor one Sunday afternoon, and the mayor called myself, and apparently Councilor Boschman was demanding that we appeal and sue our own zoning board of appeals. We successfully commenced the suit against the zoning board of appeals, and were able to bring Cumberland Farms in to the mayor's office, and we had a very frank discussion about the safety of the construction that was going on the Electric Ave, Cumberland Farms, which is currently being built right now. What we were able to do is identify the cost of certain signs that Mr. Boschman wanted to have installed. The money's going to be received and deposited into your general fund. If somebody wants to appropriate that money to install those signs, that would certainly be in the council's discretion. If you want to appropriate that money for some other pressing need, you could do that as well.
So
Thank you,
Councilor Boschman got us $16,000.
Well, I mean, credit was credit is due.
All right.
You ever do the right thing for people of Clayton.
Any questions on the motion? On the item?
Motion to approve 12418.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 12418.
With gratitude for Councilor Boschman's efforts.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Last item on the agenda, 12518, order that the city of Fitchburg approves the expenditure of funds from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Transportation Complete Streets Grant in the approximate amount of $219,100 for the purpose of said grant, which is for street and sidewalk improvements in the Upper Common area. Mr. Skorsky.
So, councilors, I see Councilor Boschman's gift of $16,000, and I raise him the Community Development Department's grant received for $219,100 for purposes of roadway and pedestrian improvements in the Upper Common. These improvements will go primarily towards sidewalk repairs in and along the Upper Common area. If you've walked the Upper Common recently, you've probably noticed some of the brick sidewalk is falling apart. You probably have noticed that some of the ramps for pedestrians, and in particular for disabled pedestrians, is difficult to traverse. And there's also issues with crosswalks. So the main thing that will be worked on here, aside from street painting improvements in the sidewalks, is actual new installations and paintings of crosswalks, and in 2 cases, rapid flashing beacons that will basically, when people want to cross over to the Upper Common, they press the button, it twirls, it lights up, and they can safely cross. And that was the first phase of our Complete Streets prioritization process that we identified as a project we wanted to apply to the state, because we've had a lot of people at the Fitchburg Farmers Market, the music at the Common, etc., that have trouble getting to that park. So that's where these funds are going, another effort to make Main Street more walkable and pedestrian friendly.
Counsel Boishman.
Tom, we're not gonna put bricks back, are we?
No.
We're not. So what are we gonna use, concrete?
Yep.
Very smart move. Okay, thank you.
Counsel Squalia.
Is this Complete Streets grant dependent upon any other configuration or any other configuration of Main Street that we might be approving at some point or have already approved?
I can't imagine what you might be speaking of, Counselor. But, so I've heard that kind of in the air recently, and I guess what's worth noting there is, so our Complete Streets funds can only be used towards Complete Streets activities. So in the case of other areas of Main Street, perhaps, if we want to make improvements and get grant funds to improve those areas of Main Street, and I would say that's probably not just isolated to Complete Streets funds, but Mass Works funds as well. The way that Secretary Pollock really approaches those grants is they need to be for projects that are making an area more walkable, making it more pedestrian friendly. So just hypothetically, if we were to ask for a grant to help improve a 2-lane, 1-direction highway, it would probably be denied because it's not a complete street and it's not pedestrian friendly. But to answer your question more literally, this grant in particular is not in any way, shape, or form connected to any other roadway configurations on Main Street.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Counsel Caddy.
So, Tom, is there going to be any roadway design? So my question was specifically, if you're coming from the new Rotary and you're coming up, approaching the Upper Common, you're looking to your left because there's people that are coming around the Common. And you're distracted because you're looking to the left, and if someone's crossing the street from your right, you're looking left.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're coming around the Common to merge into traffic, you're looking right because the traffic is coming in from the new Rotary.
Right.
And your eyes aren't looking left where there's someone crossing
Right.
the street. Just because you put a crosswalk in the road doesn't mean it's safe.
Right.
So it's more of road design.
Great.
So
And I would argue signage as well.
signage is very important, but
Oh, actually, our traffic engineers are here. They're here for another meeting later this evening, but they also happen to be the same engineers for this project. And we conducted a walkthrough about a month back where we identified that same issue and basically also proposed. And, you know, nothing here is set in stone. There's sort of a general scope that these are the things we're going to work on. But if a new crosswalk is installed there, we'd also like to have signage that would also reflect along with the beacon itself to show that there's a crosswalk coming, and drivers need to make a decision and they need to keep their eyes open.
So, road design to reduce speed, because what it actually is people are traveling too fast and there's too many distractions in that area.
Correct.
So, you know, again, I'm glad they identified that, but I just want to make a point that just because you're putting a flashing light on,
Right.
that could be merely just another distraction in somebody's eyes.
Right, fair point. And in our Complete Streets prioritization, we have identified, in particular, work at Mechanic Street at that intersection there, which I think we all could probably agree is not optimal for pedestrians or anyone for that matter. It's a $700,000 project. So ultimately, Complete Streets capped at about $400,000 a year. So we applied, at least in this round, for those things that we knew we could accomplish that were sort of the lower hanging fruit. And this one seemed like a clear win just because of the need in the area, but there's certainly other problems in and around the Common.
Thank you.
Motion to approve 12518.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve 12518. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.